Welcome to Generation Gap Sportscast, a look in the world of sports as seen through the colorful eyes of our gang of six. Ranging in age from 25 to 70, we take you on a journey to sports heaven, discussing everything from the real to the nonsensical. We're family, and like in any family, when we don't all bleed the same team colors, the talk can get personal. So here we go with Sportscast number 4. Uncorked, unvarnished, unrestrained, unrepentant, unseemly, and utterly unlike anything you've ever experienced before. Let's meet the family. From oldest to youngest, we've got Bob, yours truly, John, Charlie, Bobby, Benny, and Nick. All right, let's dig in. It's May. Everyone is consumed with the playoffs. Could be the NBA. It could be the NHL. We've just wrapped up the NCAA tournament. Obviously, the best games, the most exciting games are taking place right now if you're a professional basketball or professional hockey fan. Just look at the Lakers, Golden State Warriors series right now. Whoever would expect such great games, and there's been a lot of them. The question is, are these games so special that the regular season is kind of losing a lot of its luster? Or is it a possibility we should be looking to expand the playoffs, invite more teams in? Where would that lead us in terms of fan interest and the good of the game? All right, Bobby, give us a first volley on your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think this really depends a little bit on the sport. You know, some sports have already started expanding their playoffs. Others have considered doing the same, but have yet to make that move. I kind of went through different sports to kind of give us a gauge of where we are at the moment. Major League Baseball, used to be, that one wild card team. And then they, several years ago, they added on a wild card game as kind of a play-in. Now they've expanded to have 3 wild cards in the American League and in the National League. I think baseball is in a pretty good spot there. I don't think they should expand anymore because you have a 162 game regular season. You don't want to lose the importance of the 162 game season and everything that includes as far as balance of power. We got these long division races, and it's really important to keep that intact, I think. So I don't think we want to go any further than we are right now. I think they're in a good spot. National Hockey League is perfect. Don't mess with it. 16 teams. Only thing I might adjust is the way they do the seeding. I preferred the 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7. Now, they've recently switched to divisional rounds. And so you're getting a lot of the same matchups year after year. But that's kind of nitpicky. 16 teams, leave it at that. It's perfect. As far as soccer goes, they're going to be expanding the World Cup field. It's been 32 for a number of years now. They're going to be going to 48. So you could see some more lopsided games potentially. However, soccer is the most popular sport in the world. There are always teams that are competitive that get left out. I mean, we've had recent World Cups where, teams like Italy, for example, didn't even qualify. So I don't think it's going to be a big issue in soccer necessarily. It's, certainly going to be some more games, more excitement, more countries involved. But you don't want to get too crazy there. NBA, I think we have a problem. You have these play-in games that they have recently added on. So you have the 16 teams that were automatically getting in before. Now the teams that are seeded 7, 8, 9, and 10 are doing this play-in round. So you're ending up with teams with losing records playing in these play-in games, which I think is really devaluing the regular season a bit. And if you look at what happened this year, the teams that were in the 9 and 10 slot in both the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, those teams all did not advance to the actual field. So it really just seems to be, somewhat of a waste of time. And obviously, there's certainly a financial factor as to why they added that on. But I don't think that's something that we need to have. College basketball, has been pretty much perfect for a long time. They had the 64, the 68. I'm not a big fan of necessarily. I don't think we need those play-in games. I think 64 is perfect, but it's not a huge deal. Then you got things like college hockey, college lacrosse that are pretty well set with their 16. So I think it really depends on the sport. Some have expanded already too far. Some are perfect. Leave it alone. But we don't want to get too crazy here where the regular season is really, becoming somewhat meaningless.
Bob, you can certainly remember, Bob Sr., back when the NFL had 4 teams in the playoffs, Major League Baseball maybe had 4 teams, college basketball tournament was 16 teams. It's quite different now. As a fan, thinking back when you really enjoyed that type of tournament versus today and all the excitement that surrounds the tournament, where do you come in?
It's interesting you asked me to reflect on that. Back in the day, actually, when in the early mid 60s, the NFL had 2 teams in the playoffs, your Western Conference winner and your Eastern Conference winner. It was real simple. And it exemplified a principle that has long since disappeared, and that is that only champions of something get into tournaments. For a while, you had to be a champion to get into the NCAA basketball tournament. And so there were some terrific teams, namely North Carolina State and Maryland, a couple of years that couldn't get by North Carolina, that didn't make the NCAA tournament. And folks started to think, well, wait a minute, if you got teams in the top 10 that can't qualify for the tournament, maybe something's wrong. And so we got down that slippery slope where now you can have an excellent conference that might have 6, 7, 8 teams in it. But what does that mean for the significance of a regular season championship? Does it devalue the season? And then you throw in the conference tournaments. You play the regular season, then you throw in the conference tournaments to win the right to get the automatic bid in the NCAA tournament for basketball. And I think we saw some pretty good examples this year that winning a conference tournament only meant something to those who really needed a bid. And a lot of your top teams didn't win their conferences, and winning the conference didn't seem to matter much either way as the NCAA tournament progressed. And of course, parity is another issue. So the whole scheme has evolved. I have trouble ginning up much enthusiasm for most of the basketball conference tournaments in the NCAA because I know, and the players know, and the coaches know, there's not a whole lot at stake unless you're in a 1-bid conference. About 5 years ago, the Ivy League finally decided to do a postseason tournament, allowing only half the teams to qualify. And it's become a big event in their realm, and the tournament's interesting. It doesn't seem overly large. It's all done in one weekend, and it's just kind of an event. So we're at an interesting point with respect to all this. It does seem to me, getting to Bobby's point, that the NBA regular season is starting to be even more devalued than it used to be. Particularly, it seems, in basketball, there are teams that can turn it on at the end of the year if they've got the talent. And the regular season becomes about pacing yourself, not wearing out your guys, avoiding injuries and things like that. So
I'm going to throw this one towards Charlie. As Bob was commenting on, a lot of this gets these conference championships. The playoffs get watered down with so many teams. It seems like the individual game becomes less meaningful. And certainly from a fan's perspective, it's great to have access to so many games, but at some point they sort of lack a lot of the interest as well. But do we really ever see this changing? I mean, money seems to be driving so much of this. That's the real commercial interest here. And as long as there's more money to be made, should we just not expect that it's going to continue to expand?
I agree 100% that is both what has been happening and what will continue to happen. At the end of the day, I think money's been driving the decisions, and pretty much pretty much every sport and every league has been expanding. I think maybe the NHL has kind of held the line on that the most in recent years. But money's going to drive it. But part of, in a way that the money follows the fan interest. And if you look at TV ratings in most of these cases where leagues have expanded their playoffs, fan interest has generally followed. So don't think you can really separate those two things entirely. The only other sport I would like to touch on that we haven't really touched on thus far is NCAA football, where obviously they're expanding their playoff format from 4 to 12. And to me, that one seems like a no-brainer. I suspect most people would agree. When we had 4 teams, we could pretty much pick 2 or 3 of them before the season even started. I think going from 4 to 12 will make it quite a bit more interesting. Will allow in some worthy, strong teams. I'd be surprised if it stops at 12. My bet is it'll get up to 16 before too long. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's all about money. And I would say in general, I kind of agree. I mean, Bobby, for the most part, you felt that sports are roughly where they ought to be. I agree with that. And I think NCAA football is moving in the right direction.
Nick, when you think about that, what your dad just said, you're a young guy, but you also understand that even though you never played college football, there's a lot of wear and tear on the body, as well as really keeping kids away from the classroom. Is it really in the best interest of the sport long term if you've got a lot of these kids just getting worn out and physically pummeled by playing that much gridiron football?
Yeah, I think college football is kind of in a different case than this NBA or the MLB. I think they are in a situation where they almost have too few games. That said, I don't think they're in a position to expand the season for those exact reasons you outlined. I think with the 4-team playoff or the BCS, 2 teams, it's often you'll see teams seasons end like it's in September, and then suddenly we have games that don't matter for different reasons. Other than there being too many. So I think about expanding the playoffs, especially the wear and tear on these kids. I think that's definitely real. If you look at basketball, all the AAU games that a lot of these youth players are playing before they even get to college or the NBA, that has implications. So we're talking about, the already short careers of NFL players. Expanding games in the college season might, maybe you'll see some drop out at certain points to protect their long-term health. And that's just the players who have professional aspirations. So I think it's definitely something to keep in mind. That said, I think there definitely is a kind of a balancing point for college football in expanding the playoffs to allow some of those better teams to get in without having too much wear and tear.
So Benny, most of the teams that you follow, especially in college football, they're always on the outside looking in. So this probably excites you to some degree to think that potentially one of your teams might actually make the playoffs.
Well, John, I must say I have no idea what you're talking about. But in terms of college football, I vaguely follow it. I'm not a huge college football fan. University of Kansas, if that's what you're alluding to, has historically not been very good since I was probably a kid in 2008. I know they made the Orange Bowl, but it's a program I think that's improving slowly. But in terms of other things, I went to a D3 school. St. John's University is not, this doesn't affect them at all. They're always a contender for the Division 3 title. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. The playoff expansion formats and leagues, I agree with Charlie. It's pretty much all about money, as many things are in the world. And I think it kind of depends on the league in terms of whether this works for them or not. I think for domestic sports leagues, I think it's bad. I think the quality degrades more and more when you expand it. I think Bobby had a pretty good analysis of that. I also agree with Bobby, though, when it comes to the World Cup. I think this is great for the World Cup. This is every 4 years. Every 4 years, yeah, why not have 48 teams in the World Cup? All these people that want to see their country in it that may not get the chance to otherwise, these tiny little countries that may never qualify into that smaller selected group. But if they were to 48 expansion, all of a sudden you get countries with like a few million people that are like, finally, we're in the World Cup and we have a chance to do something for our country. I think it's just fantastic and a brilliant idea for growing soccer even more around the world. So I think that's really cool. I know another part of this conversation which I think was really interesting, also connected to the world of soccer, is the amount of games players play. And this is probably a lot of Americans are not aware of this, but this is a humongous problem in professional soccer. I was talking to the head coach of Sporting Kansas City several months ago, and we were talking about just how players, whether they're on the international team, especially on the international team, are playing games basically year round. It does not stop. There is no break. You're playing, in like a bazillion different club tournaments, your domestic league, and then bigger leagues for continental leagues. And, maybe there's a World Cup or there's other international games. And so for soccer, it's insane. And players are getting injured all the time because they just do not stop playing. So if other leagues want to prevent having this kind of endless cycle of games where, people can't even keep track of who's playing when because there's so many games going on, I think staying away from that format for professional sports is a good idea, because it's a disaster over time. The more games might seem like a good idea, but eventually you're just going over the edge with it. So I think there's got to be balance. And I think already domestic leagues, especially in the US, are in the wrong direction at this point. So
Benny, would be fair to maybe to comment that the way you're looking at it, maybe the one limiter in terms of how much expansion we'll see comes from the pushback that the players themselves might put out there, that at some point enough is enough. They physically just can't take it.
I would hope so. I mean, you've already kind of seen that to a certain extent. I think in the NFL, there's been players that complain about expanding the season. It is a concern. I mean, and for college athletes, I mean, my gosh, if you're a top college athlete, kind of connecting to previous conversations about, players not being able to go pro right away. If you're a college athlete that has the potential to become a professional player, the last thing you want to do is get hurt and ruin your potential career in college. So yeah, expanding games is definitely something that can be detrimental to someone's physical career as a player. So yeah, I think that if they're smart about themselves, I think they should be pushing back at some point.
Okay. Well, I think it's time we take a refreshment break. Charlie, what are you drinking up there in Wabisa?
Well, John, as you well know, there's a brewery about halfway between you and me in New Glarus Brewery, well known for Spotted Cow, which is sold only in Wisconsin, but many visitors drive it back to their home states after they've been here. And it's been kind of the holy grail of their brewmaster to create the perfect Pilsner, which he believes he has now done. This is the New Glarus Brewing Pilsner, creatively named, which
a bottle or a can.
Yes, it does. You got the same thing. You must have been inspired by the newspaper article the other day.
I love the beer baron.
You
Every
betcha.
Sunday I read his article.
All right. Well, here we go. This is available just for probably a couple months. I happened to be driving through New Glarus this last Sunday, picked up 4 12-packs. It's a cross between a German Pils and a Czech Pils. I would say it's really good. I don't know if it's going to be my favorite Pilsner, but hey, it's a pretty solid beer.
I agree. I've got 4 different Pilsners. I've got a Czech Pilsner. I got Pilsner Urquell. And I've also got a German Pilsner in addition to this. Of course, there's beers like Heineken and Stella that are good Pilsners too. But, obviously you put that in a good glass like this. It's not quite to the level of the best ones, but it's a very good beer.
Yeah.
It's a very good beer. And quite frankly, although New Glarus makes a lot of great beers, this would probably be my favorite, all the beers that they make. This to me is the one I enjoy the most.
Good. That says a lot. Does anyone else have a beer they're enjoying tonight? I thought I saw Ben, perhaps with a Corona.
Yeah. So, this is kind of funny for me. I mean, I have not had many Coronas in my life. But today I'm having one. And it's Mexican beer for those who are not aware. There are commercials if you've ever seen a TV before. But yeah, it's a good beer. I really like it. I think, and Charlie and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you guys, whenever we would visit you in Wisconsin, would have Coronas around or something. And I went to a Cinco de Mayo party just a few days ago, and they had Coronas there, and I had Corona. I was like, wow, this is pretty good beer. I'm gonna start drinking these. So yeah, so I have a Corona today, and yeah, if you haven't had it, you should try it. So
Cool. Bob, what do you have going on there?
I stumbled onto this a couple of weeks ago in one of our local liquor stores. This is called Baltimore Blonde, which is made by Guinness, which has a plant in the Baltimore area. It's a conventional blonde beer, except for one thing. It's got a hint of stout flavor, and this is really tasty. I could drink more than one.
Nick, you had an interesting looking mug you were drinking from.
Yeah, I'm actually I'm doing water tonight, but I stole my roommate's mug. If you guys can see it here, it says #badass. It's kind of, I'll keep it brief, but that's kind of what I hope to bring tonight.
So you're making a healthy choice this evening.
I'm representing the healthy individuals in our audience today.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay. I did not know we had any, but that's one way for us to expand our market.
Well, you think in many thousand, there have to be healthy individuals.
Cool. Bobby, how about you?
Well, I'm actually representing Mexico as well. Like Benny did. I have a Dos Equis with a Mandarin garnish and pretty good beer, right of Monterrey, Mexico.
Very nice. A lot of beer tonight.
I will say though, Benny, that that Corona, good beer, but it's much better with a lime.
so tell me what to do, Bobby. Quit trying to bully me on our podcast, all right? Or I can tell Dad. So
I'll help you out.
Well, there you got it, John.
Hey, one more comment on this Pilsner. As inspired as I was when I saw the Beer Barons article, I bought 4 cases of this for the Royal Golf Club bar, so we can start selling it immediately. So we'd be one of the first, probably the second golf course in Wisconsin to actually get access to this stuff. So, and every golf course needs a great Pilsner. Just ask Donald Trump. Okay. So, moving right along to predictions and what's coming up next. I think, Charlie, you're leading the plate on this one, too.
Let's start with the NBA. And of the 6 of us, 3 of us chose Milwaukee to win it all. 3 of us chose Boston. Of course, Milwaukee went down in flames, losing to the Heat in 5, which subsequently led to their coach getting canned. Ben and John and I all still have Boston alive, although they're in a dogfight currently with Philadelphia. So that's kind of where we stand on the NBA side. NHL, crazy stuff. Bobby, what's going on there?
Well, as I told you, NHL is like March Madness. I think I'm the only one that did not pick the Bruins to go to the finals, and they lost in the first round to the Florida Panthers in what is now becoming a theme over the last, decade plus, where President's Trophy winners don't win the Stanley Cup. And it's actually even worse than I had previously mentioned. There's only been like 1 or 2 teams in the last 10 plus years that won the President's Trophy and even got out of the second round. Most of them are out in the first or second round, don't even make the conference finals. So it's winning the President's Trophy is not an indicator of playoff success. It's such a grind. The game changes a little bit. It becomes more physical. The game is not called as tightly by the referees often. And so different teams sometimes succeed more. You know, that Boston Bruins, their star goalie, Linus Ullmark, who had a great breakout season, hadn't really had much playoff experience, and it showed. You know, he got lit up a couple times by the Panthers, and the Panthers are up 3-0 on the Maple Leafs now, well on their way to making the conference finals. So I still technically have my 2 finalists left. I had the Oilers over the Maple Leafs, but yeah, Toronto's in big trouble. They're down 3-0.
Yep. Of the 6 of us, 3 people had Boston win it all. Bob and John and Nick, and obviously they're done. And Bobby and Ben, you guys had the Oilers. I've got the Stars, although both the Oilers and the Stars are down 2-1, I believe. So we're all in trouble. Anybody else want to add anything to the NBA and NHL so far?
I do actually. I think it's really important at this point in time to have perhaps it would be appropriate to have a moment of silence for Nick and the Milwaukee Bucks. If for those who have been watching the last few episodes, Nick and I have had a little bit of a rivalry that's gone on, and with him saying that the Bucks are better than the Celtics, but it appears that I have become the winner of that argument, given the Bucks are not in the playoffs and just fired their coach. So, Nick, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I just want to give you a chance, if you want to, think of it as like a therapy type session, but if you want to just say some words, perhaps about your loss, we'd all be, good listeners, I think.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Benny. A few thoughts. I think it was ripping of the Band-Aid for the Bucks in some ways. I think we could see this probably wasn't a championship team a few games in, even though it only lasted 5. So I think that's a positive rather than struggling, perhaps the conference finals. Get it over with, make some changes. So I think in a way it was actually kind of a good thing. Other thoughts, if I were a Celtics fan, I wouldn't feel so comfortable right now. Let's assume they get through this series with the Sixers. The Heat almost won last year, conference finals series. I'd be pretty nervous right now, seeing Jimmy Butler peering over the fence, waiting for Boston. So you can gloat, but wouldn't be too excited.
Well, luckily the Celtics are not the Bucks, so I think we'll be okay. But anyway,
we'll see what happens.
Moving on, Major League Baseball. Early in the season, 40 or so games in, we're starting to see some early trends. Some teams get off to hot starts, as always happens. Let's go. Let's start old and go young. Bob, what do you think? Can you give us your 6 division winners for this season?
Yeah. National League, I liked Atlanta in the East. Watched them play Baltimore this week on TV. Atlanta won 2 out of 3. Baltimore actually had more total runs, but Atlanta won the close games, including the last one in extra innings. Now, they look really solid in every way. Could maybe strengthen their bullpen just a little, but very strong team, off to a great start. Atlanta looks like they're gonna go. National League Central, I'll go with Milwaukee, though I think a lot of things could happen there. I think the Central Division in both leagues is not that great, and there are a lot of possibilities at large. I think that the Dodgers out west and the Angels out west in the American League, although they're not doing that well, and they are infamous for having the 2 best players in baseball and not making the playoffs. So that would be a real turnaround if they do it. Go with my heart. I like Baltimore in the American League East, even though Tampa Bay is off to a rocket start. Tampa Bay looks really, really tough. Of course, you don't have to win the division, I would note, to win the World Series because of the expanded playoff systems that we talked about. We could find that all of the wild card teams in the American League are from the Eastern Division, which at least by early indicators, is far stronger than the rest. All 5 teams in the Eastern Division have winning records and have been beating up on the other divisions. So we'll see.
Well, Dion, what do you think, John?
Well, I was really heartened by how the Orioles got out of the box so fast. And actually, to Bob's point, they are playing pretty well. But Tampa Bay is red hot. The Orioles are already 6.5 back. I just have to go with Tampa Bay. And, as much as I want to see the Orioles take it. In the Central, I think that the Tigers will be there at the end. I don't think that's a particularly strong division, but I think the Tigers have enough there that they can take it. In the West, I'll go with Los Angeles. I think they've got a little bit more firepower than Texas. I think their pitching will hold up over the course of time. National League, you go to the East. I think Atlanta's the team to beat. They're pretty loaded up. Generally, they've been a pretty good playoff caliber team, and I like where they're at. In the Central, boy, it's kind of a pick 'em there too, but I like where Milwaukee's at right now. I think they've got a decent blend of power, and they've also got some solid pitching, more so than past years. I think the Brewers can actually take that division. And in the West, I'll take the other Los Angeles. They're off to a nice start. I think they are the class of that division.
All right. I'm going to have quite a bit of agreement with you guys in the NL. I do like the Brewers, despite their recent 6-game losing streak. I agree they've got a nice combination on the hitting side, pitching side, some good young energy on that team this year. They seem to have a really positive dugout atmosphere, which can matter. I too like Atlanta and the Dodgers. Over in the American League, hard to argue with Tampa, given their hot start. And I would add in Cleveland and Houston. Bobby?
Yeah, so start with the National League. I like the Atlanta Braves in the East. World Series winners a couple years ago. They still have a pretty loaded roster. So I like them there. Central, I think, is a toss-up. I actually like the Cubs to kind of come out of nowhere and have a strong finish. They got a young team. I think they gel over the course of the season. And if there are a few strong teams, Diamondbacks are off to a pretty good start. But I like the Dodgers. I just, they're spending a ton of money every year. They're absolutely loaded. They are also a recent World Series winner, so I got to go with them. American League in the East, I like the Tampa Bay Rays. I think the Orioles don't quite have the pitching, so unless they make some significant additions throughout the season, I don't think they're going to be able to win the division. I think they have a great chance to make the playoffs, but I don't think the division's in the cards this year. In the Central, I like the Minnesota Twins. I think they've finally put it together. They've had some talent for a few years and have really underachieved. And I think this season they actually, get it all together and take that division, which, is a weak one. And in the West, I have the LA Angels. They have the 2 best players in baseball, arguably, Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani. If they don't make the playoffs this year, when the hell are they going to do it? And if they don't make the playoffs this year, there's a real good chance Shohei Ohtani decides to leave. Because he's, as some people have proclaimed, the next coming of Babe Ruth. He's not going to want to be stuck on a team that perennially does not make the playoffs. So I think they're going to feel some pressure come the trade deadline if they're in the mix to make some moves and make sure they get over the hump and get in. So I like the Angels to finally get that.
Ben, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that there's probably a common trend with a lot of these picks. In the AL East, I am wearing an Orioles jersey here, which people can obviously see. However, I'm also a realist, so I don't think the Orioles are going to win the division. As much as I would like them to, I think in the future, I think they could, but I just don't think they have a starting pitching right now. I think they're going to need a few pitchers to take that next step, which I think will take more time than they would need to win the division this year. So I think it's going to be the Rays in the AL East. AL Central, it's kind of a trash heap in terms of who's going to win that. I'd love to see Kansas City Royals win 30 straight games and take that division lead, but don't think that's going to happen. So I'm going to go with the Twins, just kind of throwing a dart at the dartboard there. I don't really know. AL West, I think that, yeah, the Angels are going to need to win this division. I think this is kind of a do or die type of scenario for them. Obviously, with Ohtani in that situation, though I won't go as far as some have said in terms of calling Ohtani the next Babe Ruth. I think that's an incredibly generous statement. He's obviously he's a great player, but for God's sakes, Babe Ruth, led lead to home runs like 10 seasons. So let's not get carried away. In terms of the NL East, I would say the Braves. NL Central, I would say the Pirates. They got the AAA team here in Indianapolis. Though it seems like they have a lot of talent still in the minor league system, so they could just start bringing them up later on in the year. And Pirates, watch out. NL West, and go with the Dodgers. They pretty much just pay their way to winning. So just makes sense to me that the Dodgers would take that division.
Well, that's it for predictions, John. Over to you.
Can I share mine?
Oh yeah.
Mine.
So go ahead, Nick.
Last and forgotten.
Cut that out.
Nothing too exciting. AL got the Rays, the Tigers, and the Angels. Looking to see Shohei Ohtani on a good team, hopefully for once here. Then the NL got the Braves, the Brewers, and the Dodgers. Got the Dodgers. I think it seems like money still wins out most of the time in MLB. So yeah, those are my predictions. You can keep it rolling now.
Good stuff, guys. Well, obviously, in the world of sports, there's a lot going on. Sometimes it's very quietly. Sometimes it's things that make a really big headline. Each of you have sort of your own little niche of areas you like to share and talk about. So, Bobby, what do you have to share in the world of sports, your world?
Yeah, so the NCAA lacrosse tournament is going to be starting up. Actually, the play-in game, speaking of expansion, the play-in game is tomorrow, and then the rest of the tournament will start on Friday. And I'm hoping that the team I have kind of taken on as my favorite, Johns Hopkins, who we have some familial history with, I'm hoping they can take it this year. They've had a real good bounce back season, and they're looking like potentially one of the top contenders in a loaded field. Or there's some great teams like Duke and Virginia that are always up there. But I think Johns Hopkins has as good a shot as anybody to make it through the field this year. So it should be a fun couple weeks of NCAA lacrosse action.
Great. Bob Senior, how about you?
NCAA lacrosse, I agree with what Bobby said. Generally, it's a loaded field. It's also susceptible to surprises along the way. I'm looking for Yale to have a bounce back season. Not bouncing back from much. They've been consistently good. Won the national championship a few years ago, but they got off to a mediocre start this year, but surged a bit at the end and showed that they could be a force as we go on. I certainly like Johns Hopkins. Notre Dame is formidable. It will be it'll be fascinating. Lacrosse has generated a really exciting tournament with a lot of quality teams and a lot of surprises along the way. Ultimately, though, I think Duke will probably nip Yale in the finals. Okay. Which would be a reversal of their championship meet a few years ago.
All right. Benny, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah. So there's a few different kind of interesting sports updates. First off, I'm sure many are aware that Aaron Rodgers is now with the New York Jets. So Super Bowl, here we come. No, I think the Jets.
I'm surprised you don't have a jersey already.
Yeah, that's right. I got to take it one step at a time. All right, just one step at a time. I want to prolong the process of the Jets having a solid quarterback for as long as possible, and don't want it just to be a blur. So just do little things over time to celebrate that. But I mean, I think the Jets are going to be a a playoff team this year. I mean, they were already an okay team last year, even though they did not make the playoffs. So going from probably like, the worst quarterback in the league to a pretty good quarterback who, a little older now, but given how quarterbacks are aging these days, he still can be incredibly good. So I think the Jets will be a good team. I think they'll make the playoffs. Thinking of NBA again, one thing that was announced recently was that Joel Embiid won the MVP award. Interesting fact about that is that the last 5 NBA MVP award winners were born in another country. They were not born in the US, which is, I think, an interesting trend. We were talking about baseball a few episodes ago and the sort of foreign superstars building there. Well, guess what? In basketball, it's happening as well. Foreign-born players are starting to take over the NBA when it comes to the MVP. So that's something to keep track of more and more over time. In terms of soccer, some people may have heard that Lionel Messi may be going to Saudi Arabia to play for a club team there and leaving Paris Saint-Germain. This would be incredibly interesting given that Cristiano Ronaldo is already playing for a Saudi Arabian club. Just goes to show that this Saudi oil money continues to infiltrate the sports world quite a bit, since they're willing to pay people just ridiculous sums of money to play there. And Saudi Arabian soccer, for those who are not aware, is kind of a strange place. Like the average lifespan of a Saudi Arabian soccer coach apparently is 3 to 4 months. So if you don't win a game, if you lose one game, basically you're canned after that. So in fact, Cristiano Ronaldo's team won 7 straight games, then lost the 8th one, and they fired the coach right after that. So unacceptable. But yeah, so kind of an interesting world over there. Not sure if I'd want to coach there, but yeah. So
real quick, Benny, you think about Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. 6 months from now, as we're in November, kind of the heart of the NFL season, are the Jets fans celebrating that Aaron Rodgers is there, or is the New York media eating him alive?
I think there'll be a pretty good mood. I mean, unless I'd be really surprised the Jets don't make this work. I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers is in a better position than when, like, say, Brett Favre was coming to the Jets, and Brett Favre was clearly had aged a lot at that point. But at the point of Aaron Rodgers' career, I mean, last year he was still really good. And so, I mean, I think Aaron Rodgers is currently still in, very high level playing point in his career, similar probably to Tom Brady. Tom Brady retired at 45. Aaron Rodgers is 39. So I think that he's going to do well. And the Jets have a lot of talent. I mean, they've been drafting, top 10 picks the last 5 seasons, basically, because they've been so bad. So there's tons of people that he can really develop with, whether it's wide receivers or running backs. And the Jets also have a pretty good defense already. So I would be surprised if it doesn't work out. If it doesn't work out, then I don't know what's going to happen, but New York might just get rid of the Jets in general. So if it doesn't.
Okay. Nick, what's going on in your corner of the world?
Sure. I came across an interesting article from 538, kind of sports, politics, you name it, analytics, journalism outlet. Just a little thing about Andrew McCutcheon, kind of the famed, speedy Pittsburgh Pirate. So he's 36, just signed a $5 million contract. It's kind of a retirement, come home for a year contract. But he's surprisingly playing really well. And 538 has a metric that essentially calculates a player's value in terms of dollars. And through only 24 games, he's essentially generated, in salary terms, what would be worth $5.1 million. So you got this guy coming home on a cheap contract to kind of say goodbye, and he's accidentally playing super well. So kind of a fun thing to see.
Great. How about you, Charlie?
Well, as a diehard Badger fan, I would be remiss if I did not call attention to some hot water in Iowa, where the Iowa and Iowa State athletic programs currently have 41 athletes under investigation for gambling-related problems. This apparently I don't know what triggered the investigation. They're being investigated by the Iowa Gaming Commission, looking both for criminal activity as well as NCAA violations. The NCAA rules, in my judgment, are pretty strange. They basically say that an athlete cannot place any bet on any sports where the NCAA has an NCAA championship. So, for example, kind of an extreme example would be that an Iowa wrestler could not participate for money in an NFL fantasy league. Okay. Even though it's a different sport and pro level versus college level, different teams, whatever, doesn't matter. NCAA says you can't do that. And in fact, they've got some history. I think it was in 2021 where there was a player, football player, I think he was at Virginia Tech, who placed $400 in wagers on 100 bets on NBA games. And he was suspended then from 6 football games. So basically half of the football season. So in that one case, the NCAA came down really hard. Anyway, big picture to me, however, is there's, despite the spotlight currently being on Iowa and Iowa State, the fact is there are 38 states now that have legalized sports betting. Anybody can, one way or another, bet through their computers, through their phones. Athletes now, a lot of them are being showered with NIL money. To believe that this is only an Iowa and Iowa State problem would obviously be foolish. In fact, I got to believe that pretty much anywhere any serious investigation would look, they're going to find this problem. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this situation unfolds.
Right. I have a hard time believing it's limited to Iowa and Iowa State. I think if you look around the country, you'd probably find most every school's got some kind of issue like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think this might be the beginning of finding out that Iowa is the epicenter of an NCAA gambling ring. And this is just the beginning of the uncovery. That's my conspiracy.
All right.
Anti-Iowa, Minnesota.
Okay, quickly, while I got a break here in the noise. Moving on to the obscure sports world.
Okay, well, it's not so much an obscure sport this time as obscure news about a mid-profile sport that we've talked about before. That's college hockey. The college hockey world has been expanding little by little in recent years and may do still more. But the latest entry into Division I NCAA hockey is a little bit of a surprise. NYU, New York University, which hasn't had a big-time athletic profile in many years, unless you're talking about fencing, which we have. The NYU has 30 NCAA fencing championships all time. So they've been really high profile there for the many legions of fencing fans out there who keep track. But this venture into D1 hockey will be something interesting to track. NYU had a fairly high athletic profile if you go back to 1900, 1905, and so on and so forth. But much like the University of Chicago, they subsequently decided to pull back from big-time sports and to some degree even small-time sports. But here they come. It's also worth noting that they have the school nickname is the Violets, which leads you to think that there may be a culture clash with the rock and sock and world of college ice hockey, but we'll find out. And well, wish them luck. As I said, it's a growing pool, and there are a couple more entries every year. Last year or the year before, Long Island University jumped in. So it's only a matter of time before maybe Columbia decides they need to have a hockey team too. So we can watch that. So we can shower a little affection on New York sports this time.
Okay. On that obscure note, I think it's time we call a wrap to today's show. Enjoyed everyone getting together today. A lot of great insights. And we'll be back in a couple of weeks to give you more of our take on what's going on in the great world of sports. Thanks, everybody.